So, ladies and gentlemen, we had some very exciting startups at our Pitch.Next event today, again this year, and a real firework of innovations and future technologies for you. But it comes even better. From the very beginning, startups have played an important role at Formnext, as they're also an important pillar in the development of our industry. But in addition to the startups, there are, of course, other pillars that are important, and without these, innovations would not be possible. One of these pillars are the investors, who can be a decisive factor for the success of the startups, not only because of their capital, but in my opinion, often also with their know-how and experience. We want to get to the core of this relationship and the resulting opportunities, but certainly also conflicts with our next panel we're entering now. And I hope you all agree with me when I say that the panel lineup is promising many answers to our question. Joining me at the AM4U stage, please welcome with me to my left, Terry Wohlers, Head of Advisory Services and Market Intelligence at Wohlers Associated, powered by ASTM International. Terry, it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Great.
Appreciate
Next to Terry, Arno, Managing Partner of AM Ventures. Arno, good to have you.
Thanks.
Then, I've seen you already today. Stefan, it's a pleasure to have you here. Stefan Rink, CEO of AM Flow, and last but not least, our sponsor also for the Startup Challenge today, and an expert in the field of investing, Carsten Herzog, Managing Partner of HZG Group. Frank, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Guys, fantastic. Terry, I need to start with you, not only because you came from Cape Town. No, I'm kidding. So,
no, I did.
Yeah, I know that you did. It's hard to believe, but yeah, I'm just jealous. So you certainly have the longest experience in this round here if it comes to startups, development of the industry, and I mean you have such an overview of the development of this industry. From your perspective, over the last years, decades, I don't know how long you can look back, actually, how this relationship between investors and startups has changed over time.
Yeah. So what you just said was a polite way of saying you're very old, right?
I think we're pretty much the same age, aren't we? No, go ahead.
Yeah, in my dreams. Well, how has it changed from near the beginning? So it started in 1987, 88 time frame, and then yeah, just in the last 10 years, it's grown by an order of magnitude in terms of the amount of investment that companies are providing. And it goes from personal investment, self-investors, to seed angel funding, to venture capital, to all types. Some of the institutional investors in the publicly traded companies, and everything in between. And so and what's exciting, I guess to me personally, it's gratifying actually to see how different it is, because back then people were begging for money and often not getting what they need to, and in some cases not what they deserved. I mean, some had some really interesting ideas and intellectual property, but it just wasn't available because who's ever heard of this, if you back up 30 years ago. And today it's coming from the likes of people in this room, and it's if you have a good idea and you're persuasive, the sky's the limit. I mean, companies can raise tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars over a period of time. So it's very different, and it's all good today compared to the way it was.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at least the transparency, of course, is fostering as well the speed and the development and the chances of investing in startups today. Arno, I mean, ladies at the AMTC, we discussed the insight from your intensive work and for startups. I mean, you are surveying so many startups all the time. This is also a lot about success and failure, and I remember we discussed the failure rates in the startups. How do you assess the importance of venture capitalists for the startups, for their success rate?
That's a good question. In my opinion, you can't value this contribution high enough. So don't get me wrong, you can start a company your own. You don't even need venture capital money to make it big and successful, for sure. But venture capitalists, or especially the people behind the venture capital, have made a lot of very painful and expensive lessons themselves, which they can share with a startup, and therefore also reduce the risk of failure dramatically. Because normally a typical venture capitalist has an entrepreneurial track record, has made a lot of mistakes in the past, and can help startups to avoid these mistakes. And a venture capitalist, a well-connected venture capitalist, can also bring in important people into startups, not only key employees, but also advisors to the board, or key customers, for example, to help a startup growing much, much quicker than without this outside support. And therefore, from my perspective, venture capital is certainly an accelerator for a startup in many more ways than just the financial way.
I mean, we want to talk as well about culture, startup culture, and you are at least already more than 10 years in the industry as well. So how do you perceive, comparing with your early starts in this industry with today, how the culture in the startups has changed? What is the perception from your side?
It has changed quite a lot. So I started in this industry back in 2007. And there were big companies around. In fact, I think when I started, EOS was the world market leader with 180 people and 50 million revenue. That was enough to be the world market leader in industrial additive manufacturing. All the companies got bigger. There were more industrial companies that joined the game. But what I realized when I was working in strategy and business development, that it was extremely hard to found a startup because hardly anyone at that time wanted to invest in this new kind of technology, and especially in hardware. Most investors were looking at software businesses to fund, and they had no idea about new materials. Deep tech as a term did not exist back then. So the startups back then were very scientific, very geeky. And I think when you look around and look at the startups that are here, this is real flourishing, blooming culture. The startups dimension is one example. Look at their booth upstairs in 11.1. Many other companies. AM Flow has built a place where people want to work. They are attracting great talent, not by paying the biggest salaries, because most startups cannot afford to pay extremely high salary, but they are paying with a great culture and generating a place where I want to spend my entire day. And that's quite remarkable about small companies building culture.
Brings me directly to Stefan. What a handover, by the way. Stefan, we talked up front a little bit about the responsibility of investor, not only for the startup or its own stakeholders, but of course they need to gain money, but indirectly always for the development of the entire industry. What is your opinion on this, and what does the work of AM Flow has to do with it? Because there's a combining factor.
Yeah. So first I would say that the investors playing a really important role in the further development of the industry. So today already a really successful industry, but also we are not there yet. And we cracked, I think, the easy problems. It's about the more complex issues out there. And that's just not possible without the funding, the bandwidth, the coaching, the culture to get there. For us as AM Flow, as a company, we have a vision on, for instance, we focus on getting the cost price per part lower and also maintaining actually production local, whether it's in a high wage or a low wage country. And this is why we are trying to automate really labor intensive process steps. But because additive is really complex, normally if you automate, first question is, what's your standard product? Standardize a little bit more and then bring in the robotics. Name of the game of additive, every part coming out of a printer is different. So that's a really complex problem to solve. And their venture capital can help because, well, more than half of our teams is consisting out of mathematicians. And we spend quite a little bit of time to crack actually the problems dealing with the infinitive variety of parts. And we are there. And that's the step changes that the whole industry is solving. Whether it's software, materials, the printers still themselves, all the processes around. We're also not thinking about printers anymore, but production lines, and actually now at factory level. And with all this improvement, we are still small compared to mass manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the environmental promise and also the responsibility. Besides also making money as a venture capital fund, I think that's the dilemma. You see where it needs to go. You also need to make money for your investors behind your fund. And yeah, looking at that timing, I think that's an incredible dilemma.
Later on, I have another dilemma for you that we can discuss. But first, let's come to Frank. Frank, I mean, you're kind of both in one person because you are a successful founder in additive manufacturing, and today you are investing in startups with HZG Group. Compared to your beginnings at the turn of the millennium roundabout, how has the startup culture changed in your view? What are the startups all about today?
It's a good question. So I started a little bit earlier. And if you compare that time when I started, internet and email started as well. So I think there's a big difference to today in getting information and collecting information, getting involved, getting in networks, for example. When I started, I think the word startup didn't even exist. So I didn't know what a startup is. What did I when I found out that there's new technology, there's something promising, and I needed money. So typically in Germany, you ask yourself, I go to the Sparkasse, maybe they give me some money. But okay, I learned even that I was a student that a Sparkasse is not a good idea for some coincidence. We had two very successful company owners in our family. So yeah, it was clear to go to them and ask for money. And they gave it and we could start. I think it's a big difference to today. The density of information you have nowadays, the possibilities you have nowadays to network, to get information about what's going on in market and so on. I think this is a huge difference. And I think that coming back to culture, I think people live in a highly dynamic situation. Every day something changes. I think they live in a complete different environment, but what never changed. So I'm coming around. So we are screening companies, we are visiting companies, young people. The inspiration, the excitement, the motivation, I think, is still the same. When I found it out, you can completely melt material, and people with their new ideas find out it's a way for them, a track maybe to a market. So I think excitement, inspiration, motivation, I think is the same and has to be the same.
How do you say no to some of those?
Sorry?
How do you say no to some of those the people, that young, energetic people who have what they think is a great idea?
Yeah.
But you may know.
Terry, this is very difficult, especially for a person like I, who is excited very fast about things. But we have a team when we are screening companies. We have a fund. This fund has parameters. This allows us to go to invest in companies and not to invest in other companies. So we have rules, of course. Yeah. And then, of course, we have experience from our own story and have a feeling about the potential of a technology, for example. And yeah, and then we also decide what we believe in as investors and what we maybe not believe. But we still motivate young people. If they are convinced about their ideas, please follow up your ideas and your inspiration. I think we motivate them. If we do not invest, that doesn't mean that their idea is bad. I think this is very important.
So you still encourage them to continue
Absolutely.
to work
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Just might not be a fit at this situation.
Yeah, yeah.
But another question, when we're digging now into culture, we have just stated that the excitement and inspiration is still the same. What about the expectation? That would be interesting for me, because if you look at the startup there, today we had 20 startups pitching, and now that we have the transparency for you, we have the transparency on the other side. Are they like expecting to get money easily? How has that changed? I mean, I remember when you need to go to the Sparkasse 20 years ago, you needed to have quite a good business plan to get money. Is it easier today to get money, or what does it do with the mindset of the startups?
I think the easy money has gone. I think the times where really a crazy amount of money was spread into startups, I think that's gone, and I think it's good, because the investment have to be sustainable. I think I'm boring if I tell you, when I invest money, I want to get a little bit more back.
Really?
Yeah. So that's the approach, and I think investing from our perspective has to be organic. It has to be healthy.
It's a good one. Stefan, you take the question of long-term development of things. I mean, Arno, you have a fund, but you're responsible for a fund. And if I would be an investor, which I'm not, but if I would, then I would, as Frank said, I would expect an ROI, and not in 10 years and 15 years, but as soon as possible. How is that affecting each other in terms of you as the deep expert of the industry know that you need to have a certain time to develop the industry and get closer to industrial production. And on the other side, you have investors that are saying, sorry, Arno, at a certain point of time, I want a little bit more of the money back that I gave you. How's that stressing you, or how's that affecting your business?
Well, I think as you indicated earlier, it's a lot about expectation management. Yeah. Yes, I'm also a venture capital entrepreneur. I borrow money from my investors. I give them a promise that I invest in good cases that will bring a return at some point in time. This is clear. But I think that's exactly the reason why competent investors, specialized funds like HZG and AIM Ventures are extremely important for this industry, because we, as industry insiders, know that hardware development takes much, much more time and money compared to software development, for example. Yeah. We know the innovation cycles. We can assess technologies certainly differently than an outside investor that is just starting in this industry, because we know how difficult this work is and how much time it takes. And therefore, we are also competent enough to tell our investors how long it's going to take. From my experience, I've developed hardware myself. You can't do it under 6 years. And everyone that comes to me with a different statement that they are going to develop an industrial machine within the next 2 years is not necessarily having a realistic view on their development. So I think if you spend a lot of time in this industry and you know how R&D and additive manufacturing innovation works, you can assess these cases very well, and then it's also on us to communicate it to our fund investors. And typically, the good thing is, we are not in the cowboy age of venture capital anymore. This was until the financial crisis, 2008. Things have changed dramatically, or even it was a lot more regulated with the bursting of the dot-com bubble shortly after the millennium. Now we know a fund has a runtime of 10 years plus 2 or 3. So this is our action radius within which we can invest and support companies and divest, or maybe even continue supporting our investments. But this is a sufficiently long amount of time to find the right startups and make them successful.
Case in point, you said we can just jump in, right?
Go ahead. Yeah. That's why we're here.
Good. Yeah, so case in point. So a company today I bumped into. So they've worked 5 years behind the scenes. There's a company from Turkey, I don't even recall the name. It's on this, in this hall. And 5 years, they rolled out the machine today for the first time, and it's based on an industrial robot. So they had, and it's a wire-fed directed energy deposition system. So it's not rocket science in the sense it's not the first time it's been done, right? It turned out good parts, but that's, you know, a young entrepreneur might say, oh, I can do that in 12 to 18 months. No, it takes 5 years and a team of good people to get it done. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is proven by experience, and but sometimes there might be a new way. I don't know. Could happen.
Well, right. But history shows that.
Does it also not depend on the importance of the subject? Because sometimes you definitely can accelerate with more resources, but then the topics should be really critical and really having an impact altogether. Also, looking at a 10 years time limit, if you would say, hey, develop your equipment in 6 years and you only have 4 years to build out your sales, then it's also going to be really critical in the end of your fund that in the last 9 or 10 years, everything needs to happen with your whole portfolio. And how is that for, if you look at software, sometimes the time span of getting clarity whether it's a good idea is way shorter. Machine is, I would say, a little bit in the middle. If you develop for medical, you're going to invest like 15 years, easily, and then you're going to get your first return. So there must be also within the VC fund specializing in a certain industry, other bandwidths in time. Probably also the investors behind the VC. I think if AM Ventures, it's not a secret that also EOS, for instance, Langer family is, for instance, investing. Probably if some really good ideas come to the market, it's also beneficial to not only the Langer family, but also EOS as a company. So how do we think about that? Is that 10 years time span of a VC long enough or exactly right? Or especially when problems get trickier?
Well, I would say a competent investor can anticipate that it gets tricky and things always take longer and much more money than initially anticipated. Yep. And therefore, of course, we accept when a young, not so experienced founder team tells us that they're going to develop the technology within 4 years. We know that we have to expect 6 to 7 years until something is mature enough. I'm not saying that you don't have to start to build your entire company after 6 years.
Yep.
You have to build sales and an entire business structure around your business from the very beginning, and you can sell prototypes and R&D projects. But typically from the idea of a certain industrial hardware to really having a validated, stable, and scalable hardware platform that is capable of producing industrially acceptable quality parts. This is 6 years at least from our experience. And of course, let's say an experienced VC considers that in their planning, that things take longer. And the good thing is that there are consecutive funding rounds with co-investors where you team up, and people understand that you have to somehow make sure that the runway doesn't end too early for a startup, because that doesn't help anybody. But I think, just what I said earlier, it's extremely important that you have the right and competent investors who understand this game, and therefore you see a lot of purely medical-focused investors who used to these extended innovation cycles, because they take at least 10 years to get a medical certification. Or to the same extent, you will not find a defense-focused investor in our business, or any one of us is going to invest in a defense businesses, because these are separate or completely different ecosystems with other rules and other time spans and requirements. So that was also the reason why we said we are not going to invest in anything else outside of additive manufacturing, because this is the industry that we understand. Here we are competent and we can provide value, and outside of our industry we are just the guys with money but no competence, so that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So I would like to confirm the 6 to 7 years, that's true. So we have the same view, but investing in a company is the one thing, And once you are invested, I think the work starts. And I think this is one piece of our business model that we bring in our experience from my own story with people experience from 3D printing. I think this is a period which is really very important, that you are VC who is able really to support young companies in that period where they bring their product to the market, where they start, where they have the first machine to show on a trade show, for example. And then a lot of challenges begin. So they are not ready to go. The infrastructure of the company is just starting to build up. It's a lot of human resources question, how you set up that company. I think it's always a challenge how to sell the products, which sales tools you're using, production, where to produce machines, what happens when you have to build 100 machines, who are the suppliers, supply chain, and so on. I think the most, very, very important, maybe most important is this period after investment. How can you support these people that they concentrate on their core competence, technology, ideas, to build that and get them done, the other things which have to be done a lot easier. So, and I think this is what we are doing and have the network and also the competence. And yeah, the question is to make them successful, those young companies.
But you mentioned all the work. My question would be again, I mean, we have, in my opinion, that's a little bit what we discussed, Stefan. We have an industry where there's a strong dependency between the sectors of materials, hardware, software. They're all depending each other. So we just mentioned machine development or getting successful could take 6 to 7 years, if I understood correctly, okay? So on the software side, you mentioned, Arno, it could be much faster. So I'm an investor and I'm looking for a return on investment. Do you always consider the big picture? Or is it more like looking really for ROI opportunities? What is the balance between these two? Are you looking for, if we invest, let's say, in this software solution, we will then have an impact also on the machine and material in 2 to 3 years, which helps us again? Is that always like a holistic approach in your work?
It's maybe like with every startup. Of course, you need to consider, you need to have a bigger picture, something like your North Star that you are striving towards, which gives you a lot of guidance. But like with all startups, sometimes I think people put a little bit too much effort into developing a strategy and they completely ignore the real hard work that is ahead of them. Because it's so easy to do strategy work, because you don't have immediate consequences. So it's really nice to paint all these nice pictures and generate really, really nice looking slides. They are important. They satisfy your investors. They show that you have a structured thinking. It is very important. But what's even more important is the real hard work on the basis. And then a good friend of mine, a mentor, once told me success is 5% inspiration and 95% perspiration. The sweat, the real hard work that hardly anyone sees.
Said that. Albert Einstein, right?
Okay, so then he quoted Albert Einstein. So he was even more clever.
Did he?
It's 1% and 99% for Albert, but in any case, that's
Yeah, but
Always worth quoting Albert Einstein, but please go ahead.
Yeah, but the fun fact about this is if you come to the point where you ask for applications, I think it's sometimes really, you have an idea, you build a machine, it's good for something, but the broader approach on what you can do with it, where the markets are, I think this is also sometimes a weak point in these young companies, and it's clear they don't have the experience, they don't have the networks. So also here, it's, as an investor, it's very important that you have a little bit a scope, a view of what applications are maybe possible on that machine. So we decided ourselves to build up a private research, development, and application center, and we even buy the technology of our portfolio companies and apply them in our center and get companies to the technology and try to find out where maybe further markets are, or we help to further develop things, details, and so on. I think this is very important if you think of accelerating the technology, making it faster and maybe earlier successful, for example. So we are a little bit, and Arno as well, with his company, a little bit a catalyst for our portfolio companies. So we try to accelerate them and make them successful.
And maybe coming to your question, how important is it that it fits in the big picture? Of course, for me, as an investor, I match a new investment opportunity, of course, with my bigger picture, that I also have a balanced portfolio. But in the end, once the contract is signed, the investment is made, and we have assumed our seat on the board and assigned an investment manager, the startup doesn't care about our bigger picture anymore. It's really about hard work and making this company successful, right? So our big picture as a fund investor shouldn't be present in the daily interaction with a startup. It's really only focus on this investment as if it was my only one that I want to make successful. And yeah, I think this is how we should work. This is how it should work.
Terry, one question for you. I mean, we were talking all the time about VCs and investment. I mean, there are more companies to invest, like family offices or even the industry. Has that changed over time? Is there more interest today of, let's say, larger entities in investing in startups? How do you perceive that? How has that changed?
Well, yes. I mean,
or is it dominated by VCs, the whole?
Well, I would say largely VCs are where the money comes from startups, but not entirely. I mean, there's government money as well. In the United States, we have programs that can help accelerate where you're at. There's incubators at universities and other institutions, and so there's a number of methods and options for startups to get going. If you have a rich uncle or brother or father, that always helps too. And
but Terry, what
yes.
I find interesting also when you see stuff happening in the States, could you make a statement that sometimes software is overvalued and hardware is undervalued? So if you see some, let's say, investments and also some takeovers, especially lately in the States, and also some really big spec deals and so on, you saw some really strange valuations. Some service providers being valued way higher than others. Yeah. Some hardware developments not being too much valued, and some software crazy amounts being paid for in the end proving not always valuable.
I can think of one, actually, one that happened last year, a German company, I won't name them, but was it overvalued? I don't know. I guess time will tell. But but continue.
It's interesting to see also for the industry, because if you think back, and you can think back, I think the furthest, in the beginning you had the printers, at least you were able to print at least. At some point you need a software system to deal with all your customer orders. Then you need to add value on your parts with all the finishing equipment. Then you need to start thinking on factory level. But somehow, if you linger too long with the last step, you get a lot of investment in the latest success, but not really that next step necessary for the whole industry.
Yeah, we're just seeing, I mean, the software space is incredibly exciting right now, what's going on, with MES, the manufacturing execution systems, and some of the design tools that are being developed from startups, as well as some of the big four, like Autodesk and Siemens and the rest of them. And in companies like Ansys and a number of others. I mean, it's just a lot of activity, and software now plays a role in so many. If you look at the entire process chain, the workflow, it's hitting in so many areas and so critical. And it can really make the difference too, from a mediocre solution to something that works very, very well. So I'm glad to see the likes of your companies invest in these efforts because they need the help. Can I ask a question of the audience? Yeah. So how many people are looking for investment that are here?
Oh my God.
Wow, yeah. So more than half. So
A few.
So if I could ask our investors here, what are you looking for? Like, what gets your attention right away? Because you probably get a lot of people coming to you, and what does it take to get your attention? And
when we look to possible company, I think really on first place, I think it's the culture, it's the team. When we look at companies, I think this is the most important. Technology is second place. I think with a very good team and a good technology, I think you can achieve a lot. I just come back to what happens after the investment. I think you have to take a lot of decisions, a lot of important decisions. You can do a lot wrong. And I think in that period, to have a very good professional team, I think it's a lot. It's a lot. And technology really is second. Of course, we want to be inspired by technology. We want to be excited about the technology. And the best thing is if the team and the technology is superb, yeah? So, but team is number one, yeah. Culture, skills, professionalism.
And the need to cope the pressure that they get afterwards with their daily work.
Because as an investor, you have to accept crisis. It's not a track which is that way. It's something like that. And with a good team, you can go through crisis a lot easier. And if it's collaborative, I think it's also attractive and important for investors because it is important to collaborate, to work together. And therefore, it's important to have good teams.
And a question. And on that note, what is extremely important to me, I mean, we are looking at hundreds of startups every year, and we invest in about 1% of them. What we are always looking for is, if we have a great team, no doubt that's the number one box that needs to be checked, the ability to listen, to work together with the investor. Because we've seen a lot. And one mistake that we very often see, especially in first-time founder teams that are majorly technology-driven, we have engineers or technologists that are extremely convinced of their technology, and they have sometimes the attitude that this technology is going to sell itself. I don't even have to talk to the customer. They will call us, and they would want to have the technology. Doesn't work like this. Doesn't work like this. Yeah. We've seen it so many times, and we see it over and over and over again, that the ability to listen to your customers, your advisors, your investors, to build also a strong sales team that can sell the great products that you are developing is extremely important. And
how do you judge that for instance, sales, say, we are actually in that phase, say, so we've build our technology, but now in the ramp-up phase, really getting more sales in. But when you first judge, let's say, a funding application, there probably is no sales team yet. Or you have the founders, but maybe it's not going to be the founders selling the product later on, for that could be a completely different skill set. How are you able to get that out of, let's say, a pitch deck or maybe a few hour meetings? That's difficult to judge the team at that point.
It's not a pitch deck only, it's several visits.
Yeah.
You visit a company, you make tests, for example, you're benchmarking. And I think I wouldn't invest in a company only from the pitch deck or just seeing one or 2 hours. No, I think the important thing is to understand what they are doing, to understand how they are doing, and what culture they have in their company. And I think we are always a minority investor because we want to push the founders, the inventors. They are the boss. They had the idea. We want to make them successful. But on the other side, vice versa, is important that they accept that there are people who are experienced, who have gone through several things, which were not only sunshine, and to be able to listen and not to be resistant for advice. This is exactly what you said, Arno. Listening to experienced people, to listen to their opinion, but to take their own decision. I think this is the right thing.
I mean, I agree totally with you, Arno. The things that I see when I consult startups is often that, especially if it comes to the sales point, they not really have a feeling of what the customer is really wanting in the whole approach, or what the price is to be expected. Price is always a big topic because they go into the market, they think their product is awesome and great and needs to be sold without doing any sales at all. And price is the last point where, for how much we're going to sell it. This is quite the question I always experience. And then I ask, what is the customer willing to pay? Oh, we never ask ourselves. So this is really something that I experience very often. And this is, again, I think, and I did this with Arno several times with my business, to be honest, because we challenge each other, and he asked me, what do you want, what kind of price do you want to achieve? And we discuss about the customer expectation. And this is what you need to have. You need to have a counterpart, a mentoring part, a sparring partner,
Guess
right?
what happened to me when we showed the M3 Linear first time in 2001 at the Euromold show. We were so enthusiastic to get this machine done. We got just the paint and put it on the booth. And 2 days later, Chrysler arrived and said, what does this machine cost? Oh. Really?
We had no idea.
Yeah, we had some idea, but we were so focused on getting the technology done that we hadn't really a clue how to sell a machine. And then after the show, we really hurried up to compensate that, because we had to earn some money to survive. And that's the situation also nowadays. Startups sometimes entering in such a situation. And I think then it's good to have experienced people with a good culture beside and to give them advice. And for example, now I would know how much such a machine should cost. At that time, okay, we had to hurry up to find it out. Yeah.
A question additionally, Frank. How can you support a company playing the global game immediately? Because 3D printing, although a big industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, but still, if you come with an innovation in this industry, probably your clients are going to be global. And that's complex. If you're starting a startup in the States, at least you already have a big market. That's different probably in Europe, although in Germany it's already a huge market. We are from the Netherlands, that's a tiny market. So how are you supporting over there?
To be honest, so that's the privilege having sold machines worldwide. So we still have our reseller network everywhere. I just met Dr. Kim from South Korea today. We have in Japan, in the US, we have our network, and we reactivate. We just say, hey, look, we have this reseller in Japan. If you are interested to go there, we have all the good experience with them, and we connect, and they find out if they can work together. And so that's how we support the young companies if they want to go global, for example. But in the first step, if you get such a machine done on the market, I think really it's not the case that you immediately go global. I think you have to go step by step to develop your market. I think the US market, in respect of machines and health and safety topics, it's a lot different to Europe. I think you have to take a lot of things in mind to deliver a machine which is developed and sold here to the US. So it's never an approach which is from one day to the next globally. I think it's a step-by-step process. Yeah.
But it could be difficult sometimes. When we launched our first solution, actually BMW, Midwest prototyping, Materialize and ShapeBase come up. Two of them being US immediately. So there we were with our first product. And
that is the question, which people you get on board. Terry, you know Oliver Edelman, who was a long-time salesman at 3D Systems, a heat joint concept laser very early, and we got a very, 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 very skilled sales guy. And he built up the whole sales infrastructure worldwide. And this is also one topic for young companies. I think there's sometimes, or very often also, a weakness in sales. And the most important thing is to sell the product. And to have the right tools in your hand to sell products. And for this, I would spend money in really very, very good people in this department.
I think people do underestimate the effort in sales. You know, like you say, they think, oh, this is I developed it. It's a beautiful piece of work, and people just be breaking down my door to get it, and they'll pay us double than what we want because they want it so badly, and be first in line, and then they find out that doesn't happen, and so then they say, well, we need to hire a salesperson. Really good, experienced salespeople are hard to find. They're not just out there, and so you have to find someone maybe like what you did, someone who's experienced at 3D Systems, and then immediately they have the network, the know-how, the skills, and so forth to get it done.
There's a funny story when we sold the M3 to Daimler, and this Mr. Edelman joined the company, and we shared work. I said, I do the technical part because I had no idea of sales, and he said, I do the sales because it's my expertise. So we entered the room with a purchasing guy, and Mr. Edelman did not arrive. And then I had no clue to sell this machine. And so I repeated how the advantages of the machine and what technology this is. And then Mr. Edelman entered the room, and he made everything round. We saw the machine, but the guy said, it's good that you have come because Mr. Herzog doesn't want to sell a machine today. So I know I have the experience to start a company, to have really superb technology, but I had no clue about how to sell such a machine. Now I can do it, but at that time not. And it was very good to have skilled people next to me who had the tools to make this successful.
Awesome. I think we delivered already a lot of inspiration, tips and tricks, hopefully, for the whole range of people looking for investments here in this audience. I hope you enjoyed so far. Are there any questions you need to ask right now from the audience here?
Sorry? So you mean if I would have sold that machine in this special moment or not, and why this guy could do it? Yes. Yeah. Because there was a negotiation which was a little bit complex. And this is the tools you have in it. You give something, you get something back. So the technique of negotiating, I didn't have. I had no workshop for it. I didn't learn it because I was always concentrated on technology. I could tell him about everything about laser, the wavelengths, and how big the particle size of the powder is, and what materials you can machine. But the know-how, how to negotiate what you give and what you get back, and how you bring that order over the border, I think I didn't have the skills, the knowledge. Now I have it because I had to do it several times afterwards. But this is what some startups missing a lot, and it's clear where should they have the experience from. And then it's very important. This is a very important step that you, at this point of time, you get professional people next to you, even that you have pay maybe a lot of money for them. I think if they are good and do a very good job, they are more than worth it.
Arno, you have a last statement.
Maybe adding to this from my own painful personal experience of the past 2 years. I raised 100 million euros from about 30 investors. And to win 30 investors, I had to pitch more than 300 times. And the one piece of advice that we give to our startups that are going into fundraising mode is a mistake that I made. Don't pitch to the accounts that you want the most at the very first one. You need sacrifice accounts. You need to practice your pitch. You need to fail. You know, the mistake that I made when we started to raise the fund, I went to the 10 most important accounts in Germany as the first 10 appointments. And I burned them all because my pitch was really bad. It was awful. My story was not honed. It was not very smooth. I failed so many times. I ran into closed doors because I made a lot of mistakes. But let's say after 50 pitches or so, I really got a feeling what triggers investors. And after 100, it started to be a lot of fun. But for all of you who are raising money, who are starting to pitch, do not pitch to the most important investors as the very first appointment. Look for 10 accounts that you can burn, where you practice your pitch to become perfect. And then go to guys like HZG and us and give us the good story so that we understand it immediately. And it's exactly the same with selling. Don't sell to your most important customer when your pitch is still lousy.
And even if you have a large experience, I would recommend, that's what we both do all the time. We're challenging each other, even with a large range of experience at many years in selling. After a while, you get experience. It's always good to ask somebody who has probably a different opinion that you might not like at all, and this is sometimes the case, but it's always worth having the discussion, because it's a mirror for you that you have to look into, and that, did I consider every factor in order to be successful? This is quite important. There's one last question from the audience, and then I need to close the session. Okay, so I repeat the question. So the first one is, where do we have regional-wise the most VC money going to? So either Europe, Asia, or the States, yeah, or the US. And on the other side, the recommendation of either going, which startups are going either to governmental investments or VC investments. I don't know who wants.
I can try and make it extremely quick. So in terms of startups being founded. It's about 40% Asia and 30% North America, 30% Europe at the moment. Money-wise, the distribution is completely different. Most of the money, because there's much higher prices and much more money flowing into startups, is in North America. And then in Europe, a little bit less in Asia, but that's also mainly because we do not have a clear enough visibility of the Asian market. That's that one side. Going for venture debt, only when you're in a really strong growth phase. If growth doesn't happen and you are in a venture debt program, you are in big trouble. So wait as long as you can until you accept venture debt, because it's debt, it's not equity.
Maybe get seed money from the government, and then once you're into some kind of, like you say, a growth phase, then go after, a Series A, B, and so forth.
Yes. Series B, the earliest, and then after that.
What my experience is when I started company was when we found out that it can work, you can fully melt the material. So we were applying for government money, and we received. And our VC was the uncle and the father-in-law. That was when we really had an idea how the product should look like and how we want to go to the market, I think. This is maybe some orientation for you.
Maybe to add, government grants are also really okay. It's a lot of transpiration, but it straightens your thinking on what you're going to research and how you're going to bring it to the market. And it's really helpful. And it's also one of the succession points you can put on the table.
I tell you what, I need to close the session, but I'll tell you something. As a moderator, you should not exaggerate, but I'm super excited. I loved it so much, and I hope you did as well. It was, in my opinion, a fantastic discussion because we had a discussion. So thanks to the four of you. Couldn't be better seated here in this panel discussion. Thank you so much. We are not finishing the overall Pitch Next event, I promise, because we are now going over, and I beg you all to stay because this is a really important moment. We're going to hand over the awards for the winner of the Startup Challenge and, of course, of the AM Ventures Impact Award, which in this case is one in a person. So please stay, give 100 times applause for the startups because they well deserved it. So I would go over to the wall now and we hand over the prizes. Your prize money as well, Frank, would be highly appreciated. So head us over there and we will go into the award session, okay? Thank you so much. A big applause for the four guys here.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you, really. Okie dokie.